a leader. He was an excellent leader. He did a lot of things. He was criticized, and his language was not very pure, I should say. But what I was getting to, there in the Battle of the Bulge, we run into several days that the weather just closed in till the planes couldn't bring in and drop supplies, or they couldn't strafe. The visibility is very limited. And Patton went up to a little chapel and he prayed a prayer. We might not call it a prayer because he used a few curse words in it. But I used to have that prayer, and I've mislaid it. I'd give anything if I could find it. But somehow God honored that prayer. His prayer was, give me a few hours of sunshine. And I found myself the next day on top of a tank. There's 12 tanks, and we went 14 miles behind the enemy line and took this little village of Regnay. Now this was the day before Christmas. There was 2 tanks in Regnay, and we knocked out one, and one of them ran. And after we took the village, I was expecting, and go along with that, we had a huge number of people back here that was trapped. They couldn't get out through Regnay because the Germans was occupying it. And that released all that group back there. But before they came up, I was expecting the Germans to counterattack. And as soon as I hit the ground off of the top of the tank, I began to dig me a foxhole. Well, some of the fellows began to go into the houses, and later they brought out to me some of the cakes that were still hot. The women were cooking their Christmas cakes when we took the little village, and they brought that cake out to me. We stayed there until midnight, and then we had to hike back through the lines of the night. And I was a machine gunner, and I threw the barrel up over my shoulder to carry it, and we had to walk down a railroad track. And somehow there's a snap on top of the bags that I was carrying. The strap that went across, I had a snap to carry the bag on the back, and that snap caught in the trigger guard of that machine gun. And we had to be real quiet. We couldn't speak to anyone or anything, and I carried that barrel until I was ready to fall before I eventually, through sign language, got one of my buddies to unhook that thing. But we walked, well, I was with the company until I was just, seemed like I couldn't go any farther. And one of the other boys took the machine gun barrel. And it so happened that some of our troops were retreating back to straighten the line. That was Montgomery's order, that they retreat back and straighten the line. And they were pulling back these big gun 155s and so forth. And one of them passed, pulling one of those, and that big long barrel was sticking out. And I hopped on that thing, and it caught me a ride. I was give out. And that separated me from the company. And I knew, being radio man and a company runner, I knew all the orders coming in, going out. I knew where we were supposed to be and so forth. And when we come to the road where we were to turn off from the main road to go to the objective, I got off of the gun barrel and started walking by myself. And I walked for quite a long time, and I spotted a building a little ways off of the road. And I went up to this building, and it happened to be a granary. And there was a big square box in this building, and it was about half full of grain. Well, I crawled in this box and covered myself up all except for my head in that grain, and it was about 3:30 in the morning. And I slept then until daylight. And I went outside, and of course it was real deep snow. And I kicked the snow back, and I had an old K-ration with me, and I broke the box off of it and started me a little fire to warm my K-ration and make me some coffee with my canteen cup. And while I was doing that, I heard some firing going on down the road. And when I'd finished with it, I had to kick the snow back in order to have a place to get my fire. But when I'd finished that, I decided I would go down. It sounded like American guns that were firing. I thought perhaps I could link up with some other unit. But when I got down there, it happened to be my own company. Nobody never asked where I had been, and I never did tell them. They don't know till today unless they read that book. And the Germans attacked us soon after I got with the company. And again, I had the machine gun. And there was a stone house there. And I spotted a basement window. I went around the house, and I kicked open the basement door, and I'll never forget it. There they had an altar set up with a crucifix and everything. Apparently they were Catholics, and the whole family, the husband and the wife and the children, were gathered around this on their knees praying. And I didn't bother them. I just walked by them and went on over here to where this basement window was and opened it and placed my machine gun out the window. The Germans were attacked, and I never did bother them. But I felt so funny walking in on them and praying there. And it's so cold, and they had a fireplace. How I wanted to build a fire, but I knew that the enemy could see the smoke. They couldn't do that. And we continued making progress. At one time, it came such a snowstorm one night that there was a little barn nearby where we were, and they took this whole company and crowded us into that barn. It just barely was standing room to get in there. But to get there, we had to catch hands. You couldn't see where you're going. It was snowing so hard. And to lead one another to this barn. And it was so cold, the machine guns would freeze up if you didn't fire them every so often. And we stayed there till morning. And then the next day, I was a company runner following the company commander. We were going up the hill. Our commander was Lieutenant Bray. And they threw a shell in. I heard it coming, and I hit the ground. He just had said, "Come on, Riddle, let's go," to move up the hill. And I hit the ground, but he didn't. And this shell hit right by him and blew some of his clothes off, and I can still see him up in the air. I thought it killed him immediately, but it didn't. He didn't die until the next day. And I went up over the hill close enough to I could see down to where this gun that was firing, and I turned around and came back over the hill. Of course, I shared that with you last evening. I would just dodge back and forth. You could hear them put the shell in and slam the receiver up. And when I'd hear that, I'd hit the ground till it fired, and then I'd get up and run till I'd hear that slam again, and I'd hit the dirt till they fired. That's where I got back over the hill. Well, that was one lieutenant that was killed out from under. Then went into the Siegfried line. Ozenbaum, which is here, and he's the fellow pushing that little buggy. He was our commander. He got sick and went back to the hospital. And they sent us a 504 lieutenant over and assigned him to our company. He was from the States, and apparently he hadn't had any training as far as combat was concerned. And that was up near the Siegfried line. And immediately after he arrived in camp, he sent for me and he said, "Riddle, I understand you've been around a long time, and I want you to help me." I said, "I've not had experience." And I said, "Sir, I'll help you any way I can." And that itself was peculiar for a paratrooper to ask a gliderman to help him, because we were considered second-class soldiers up to the point of Normandy when we saved them a few times, and then they decided we could wear the jump boots and have a little extra.
You guys changed their mind for them.
Little flight pay, and I helped to give out the supply for the coming day. We were going to attack this Siegfried line, and I helped give the supplies out, the ammunition and the ration and so forth, and it was almost 12 o'clock before I got to dig my foxhole. So at 2 o'clock in the morning, he sent for me, and he said, "You and I are going on patrol." And we made it up almost to the Siegfried line, and you could see the outline of the different emplacements. They had spotted all around over those hills. They had the whole area covered. And I look back on it now, how dangerous that was. They could have knocked us off anyway. But we made our little patrol and back, and then early the next morning we went into attack. A Company went first, they got pinned down. B Company went next, they got pinned down. C Company was in support, and they came up, and as they came up, we would race up and join with them, and we all marched forward and made it up to the road that led into Germany. It's a huge emplacement on either side. I later learned that the German soldiers, some of them had been in this huge emplacement. Part of it was underground, and it's more or less kind of like a silo, and had a huge iron top on the thing. Some of them had been there almost 20 years, and they'd been told that there wasn't any amount of troops could drive them out of that situation. Well, 3 companies of us took it in one morning, and the engineers came in there and they put TNT under this metal roof and let it explode and turn it over in case the Germans came back and retook the thing. But we lost so many men. There I lost this young officer that come over from 504. His name was G.P. Crockett, and he's from Oklahoma. And he had just turned around and said to me, "Come on, Riddle, let's go." And he stepped out on the road, and they had it zeroed in, hit him right between the eyes. He never knew what happened. So, of course, I hit the ditch. And after the battle was over, there's only 3 or 4 still on our feet. However, we did round up about 20, 21 a little later from our company. Then eventually, I don't know where they were at. They were hiding out or doing something. But there was about close to 30 that eventually showed up out of the entire company. But I got to sleep in that emplacement that night. That's the first time I'd been inside. This was 2nd of February, and we left on the 17th of December. So that's the first time I got to sleep inside. And then we moved out from that place and went on up as far as the Elbe River, and they pulled us back and sent us back to France. That was the end of the Battle of the Bulge for me. In 94, when I went back over there for the celebration, I went up to the Siegfried line, and I found the old emplacement where we were at, and I got me a piece of the tooth. If you don't know what dragon tooth is, you've seen the pictures of it. They're in rows of staggered 5, and I wondered how that they were able to stand the pressure of the tank, but they were mounted on. I found a place where the water had washed out the earth, and it was mounted on about a 4-foot concrete slab. They couldn't push it over. It was reinforced steel. So I got me this big chunk of this dragon tooth, and I tried to beat that thing down. And you're talking about good concrete. I finally beat it down to about that size. I've got it at the house now in my war room. I'm eventually going to take a mason drill and drill me a hole in there and put a pin and put a base on it and have a tag made just to designate what it was. I didn't know whether they'd allow me to bring it home, but I got by with it in my baggage. I put it in it and brought it back. But I got to see the place where I was at and where we entered the Siegfried line.